Warning, this video contains spoiler alerts.
In this series, we'll be looking at every movie in the Godzilla franchise from 1954 to 2024 and learn about the many monsters who were introduced. The Godzilla franchise comprises of 33 official Japanese movies, 5 official US adaptations, and 5 other movies for Rodan and Mothra. For those not familiar with the events and characters in the franchise, this series will help you get familiar with them. Now for the 16th movie of the franchise, The Return of Godzilla, 1984. It started by showing a large fishing boat at night that was in the middle of a storm 100 miles south of Tokyo. The ship was trying to navigate through the storm and churning waves, but the current's constant shifting in direction prevented them from moving. They noticed that the ship was adrift and the helm was not responding. They sent out a distress signal to get help, but then they noticed something exploding out of a rocky cliff. They then heard a loud roar. In the morning, a reporter, Goro Maki, was listening to the news report about the storm and the missing fishing boat as he rowed a sailboat out into the sea to search for the boat. When he reached the boat, he called out to see if anyone was on board, but no one was there. He took a picture of the ship and turned off the radio before boarding the fishing boat. He went inside and heard a radio on with the Coast Guard trying to contact the ship. But he was met with a foul stench in the room the radio was in and found a dead body sitting on the chair. The body looked like it had been corroded or sucked dry. Goro continued searching through the ship and found more dead bodies. He then tripped over something and his hand landed on a white gooey substance. He wiped his hand in the bedsheets and noticed that one of the bodies was holding onto a metal pipe. When he got closer, the door to a locker creaked open and revealed a body that was partially corroded but still alive. Goro went to take a picture of the body but was interrupted with a parasitic creature attacked him. It tackled him to the floor, but Goro used a knife to stab the creature. He threw it off of him when it stopped moving and saw that the man who was still alive, Hiroshi Okumura, helped save him. On the deck, Goro was tending to Hiroshi's injuries and Hiroshi told him what he remembered from last night. Goro then heard a helicopter nearby and waved at it to get its attention. At the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Mitamura thought that he would never hear Godzilla's name again, but all the reports pointed to him being the cause of all this. Chief Cabinet Secretary Takagami told him that informing the people will only cause panic and they were not sure if Godzilla will attack Japan. Mitamura decided that they should keep it a secret for now. At night in an office building, Goro wanted to know why they dropped his story, and Chief Editor Gondo told him that it was because of a national security order even though he knew it was wrong. Gondo told him that the ship, its crew, and its survivor are all unaccounted for, but Goro told him that it was news. Goro wanted to know what the big secret was and Gondo told him that the big secret was Godzilla. Gondo told him that if they printed his story, the entire country would be plunged into panic and that this was a matter of journalistic responsibility. He told him not to breathe a word of this story to anyone. Goro still found it unfair and wanted to know what else he could do in the meantime. Gondo told him to look into a biophysicist named Hayashida for some background information into the story. Goro went to the Bioscience Institute to see Professor Hayashida and found him working in his office. Hayashida was not surprised that Goro was a reporter. Goro wanted to know what he was working on, and Hayashida told him it was genetic mutation design. Goro asked him if this had anything to do with Godzilla, since Hayashida lost his parents to Godzilla 30 years ago. He knew it made Hayashida a bitter man and that vengeance would drive him to study Godzilla. Hayashida told him that it was like that at first, but things were different now. Goro asked him if it was true that Godzilla was a mutation, a monster made by intense radioactivity. But Hayashida told him that Godzilla was a product of civilization and that man were the only real monsters. He said that Godzilla was more like a living nuclear weapon destined to walk the earth forever, indestructible, impervious to all weapons. He called Godzilla a victim of the modern nuclear age. Hayashida's student and intern, Naoko Okumura, served them some tea, and Goro recognized her from the photo he got from her brother, Hiroshi. Hayashida said that she did not know that he was alive because they were not allowed to tell her. But Goro wanted to know how many people had to be hurt until the truth about Godzilla got out. He knew Hayashida was involved in the government's attempts to research Godzilla. He waited until classes were over at the institute to tell Naoko that her brother was alive, and she rushed over to see him, pushing past all the guards that tried to block her from seeing him. Hiroshi's salary as a fisherman was what paid for her tuition, and he was the only family she had left. Meanwhile, a Russian submarine was patrolling its territory and noticed something coming towards them. The sonar confirmed that it was not one of their submarines coming towards them and could be a vessel using sonar cloaking. They watched it come closer towards them, and it emitted an active sonar. They knew it was not a whale but did not know what had an active sonar. When they saw how large it was, the captain ordered the torpedoes to be armed and fired. Both torpedoes made a direct hit, but there was no return fire and it still came closer. It was right above them and moved faster. It then destroyed the submarine. At the Pentagon, General Goodhue was getting a report from a lieutenant about something like a secret Russian experiment gone wrong, with ocean temperatures 7 degrees hotter than usual, tides constantly changing, freak storms, premature volcanic eruptions, and fishing boats constantly disappearing. It was also reported that a sea louse carcass washed ashore and was 5 feet long. General Goodhue went into the main command room to find out what was going on from Colonel Rashkin. Colonel Rashkin told him that half an hour ago they monitored a Mayday signal being broadcasted from a Soviet submarine, an explosion, and then they went off the air. They were sure for now that it was not their doing, since the Navy was still checking all of the United States submarines that were currently in the Pacific. Colonel Rashkin said that any other country could have attacked the submarine, or it could have been a mechanical failure. They then got a report that Russia was increasing their military activity and that they were going on high alert. General Goodhue wanted to get a hotline to Moscow ready for the president to clear this mess up, but the hotline was down for repairs. He told them to notify the president, the Joint Chief of Staff and SACs of the situation, and make sure they stayed in contact with all of their submarines in the Pacific. Back in Japan at the Prime Minister's office, Foreign Minister Emery reported that the submarine situation escalated into a major international situation where Russia was mobilizing their allies to perform a retaliatory strike. The United States had already put the entire NATO alliance on full alert due to the sensitivity of the situation they were in. A while later, they got a photo from Anti-Sub Recon, who responded to the Russian submarine's Mayday. It was taken 5 minutes after the submarine was destroyed. Prime Minister Minamura told Takagami to call the Russian and United States ambassadors immediately. He told them to hold a press conference to tell everyone that Godzilla has returned. Soon, the world was informed. Back at the Pentagon, the lieutenant was looking at the picture of Godzilla that they received and made a joke that they should put a uniform on Godzilla and sign him up to join their military. But Colonel Rashton was not impressed and showed him that he was holding the picture upside down. He went over to General Goodhue, who told him that the president wanted the bombers that Sachs sent out to return. He also wanted him to find someone who knew what they were dealing with. Back in Japan, the Russian and United States delegations came to the meeting and both sides had already decided that they will use nuclear weapons to destroy Godzilla. USA insisted that if Godzilla does show up in Japan's coastal waters or in Japan, they had to let them use nuclear weapons. Russia also insisted on this. But Prime Minister Mitamura said that Japan had a firm nuclear policy where they could not make, possess, or allow nuclear weapons, and could not make an exception even for a situation as grave as this. At night, a Russian ship was docked at Tokyo Harbor and Colonel Kashirin went aboard to activate a remote control for one of their nuclear missile satellites to have it positioned over Japan in case they needed it later on. Meanwhile, Professor Hayashida noticed that from the computer-enhanced photograph of Godzilla he got, Godzilla had to be about 80 meters tall and that it was extremely possible for him to come onto land since he needed contact with nuclear materials. He, Goro and Hiroshi looked at a map of where the fishing boat was attacked and where the submarine was attacked, which was further away from Japan. But Hayashida knew Godzilla will come onto land when he got hungry again. The military went out to search for Godzilla and were ordered not to engage when they saw him. Later, at a nuclear plant near the coast, growling and loud footsteps were heard approaching the facility. A security guard went to investigate what was going on and the ground split open in front of him. He then looked up and collapsed in shock as he saw Godzilla towering over him. Godzilla walked over him towards the nuclear plant and the workers inside scrambled to shut down the reactor. He walked over parts of the facility which exploded underfoot and he destroyed the plant's chimney. They evacuated when Godzilla broke in to get the nuclear reactor. A helicopter landed nearby and Professor Hayashida came out with Garo and Hishiro to watch Godzilla destroy the nuclear plant to get to the reactor. Hayashida went to a nearby control panel to monitor the radiation levels while Godzilla pulled the reactor out. They watched him consume all the radiation in the reactor and around the area as radiation levels rapidly decreased. Godzilla then stopped when he noticed a flock of birds were flying away and dropped the reactor to leave as well. Hayashida and the others were confused as they watched him leave for the ocean. Meanwhile, in the United States, a little boy was playing with some toys on the patio and looked up to see a military official in front of him. He called for his grandfather, Steve Martin, who was expecting the military to look for him regarding the situation with Godzilla. Steve left with the military official to Washington. In Japan, they held a meeting to figure out how to defeat Godzilla after he destroyed the nuclear plant and its reactor. They knew normal weapons did nothing against Godzilla, but there was one weapon they could use, a Super X attack plane. It was a top-secret military aircraft built to defend the capital. It was extremely heat-resistant, armored with titanium alloy and platinum circuitry, and had a variety of missiles. Back at Professor Hayashida's office, Goro and Hishiro looked over the pictures they took while Naoko served them more tea. Hayashida used ultrasonic images to determine Godzilla's brain mass and noticed many bird-like similarities that were mutated. He said that birds and dinosaurs were genetically similar. Hishiro then realized why Godzilla left so suddenly when he noticed the flock of birds flying away towards the ocean in one of his pictures. Hayashida saw the connection where the birds chirping activated a conditioned response that made Godzilla follow them so abruptly. He wondered if they could electronically duplicate the frequency of the birds chirping, Godzilla might follow that sound. He sent Hiroshi to Mount Mihara to work with an old friend of his, a geologist named Minami. Both Minami and Hishiro went to work at the top of Mount Mihara to examine the condition and lava levels contained in the dormant volcano. The military's plan was to set explosives around key areas to trigger a controlled eruption using the built-up pressure from within that will trap Godzilla inside. Hayashida proposed his plan with the bird frequency to lure Godzilla to the rim of the volcano for their plan to work. Prime Minister Minamura agreed to both plans. In Washington, General Goodhue and the others were looking over the footage of Godzilla's first rampage, which took Japan and the world by surprise. They thought of using other types of missiles from air carriers and nearby Korea. But Steve Martin, who was the only American to witness and survive Godzilla's first rampage in Tokyo, told them that they had to rethink their strategy since firepower of any kind or magnitude was not the answer. He said that they had to approach Godzilla like they would to a force of nature by first understanding him, deal with him, and perhaps even try to communicate with him. He said that 30 years ago the Japanese never found a corpse. Back at Hayashida's office, Goro told him that the Defense Corps planned on using cadmium bombs to fight off Godzilla in an attempt to neutralize him. But Hayashida knew it was not going to work and was more focused on finishing the frequency calculations because they were running out of time. A patrol helicopter then spotted Godzilla and reported that he was heading towards Tokyo Bay. They made an announcement and started evacuations immediately. Highways were backed up, train stations were overcrowded, and airports were filled. The police went to manage the crowds while the military made preparations on Mount Mihara and at Tokyo Bay. Goro thought that Godzilla being burnt alive by lava in a volcano was a horrible way to die. But Hayashida knew that Godzilla would not die to lava. He said that Godzilla had a purpose from being seen as a legend to his first appearance 30 years ago and to his night at the reactor. He said that Godzilla was a warning to everyone that when mankind falls into conflict with nature, monsters are born. He said that all he wanted to do was send him home. Meanwhile, in Tokyo Bay, Godzilla revealed himself to the Defense Corps and they fired their missiles at him. Godzilla fired his atomic breath at them while their missiles did nothing against him. He then went back underwater to swim towards the shore. All the fighter planes were ordered to return to base while the soldiers on land took over. They fired all their missiles at Godzilla as soon as he rose out of the water, but it still did nothing. Godzilla continued walking towards land and made the waters churn violently. The Russian ship rocked and slammed into the edge of the harbor they were docked at. The impact damaged their ship and equipment and left crew members injured. Godzilla used his atomic breath to destroy all the military equipment and soldiers who were lined along the harbor to block his path. Colonel Kashurin was still on the Russian ship and he used the last of his strength to launch the nuclear missile. Godzilla was now in the city and hundreds of people were running away to avoid being stepped on. The government officials told the military to get the Super X into the air while they watched Godzilla walk through the city. An announcer told all the civilians in the area, via the emergency broadcast system, that Godzilla was approaching downtown Tokyo and for civilians who are still there to stay off the boulevard. Godzilla continued walking deeper into Tokyo and blasted a short atomic breath at a news helicopter that was getting too close. It crashed in flames and set off a chain reaction of explosions throughout the entire street. He then stepped in a part of the street that caved underfoot and caused him to lean against a building to balance himself. But he got back up and continued walking through Tokyo. A train then passed by and Godzilla grabbed onto it. He broke off the first two cars of the train and looked at the people inside before he tossed it to the side. He walked through the train bridge and destroyed the train station underneath. At the Pentagon, Colonel Rashkin and the lieutenant were watching on the screens at the destruction Godzilla was causing in Tokyo. General Goodhue told Colonel Rashkin to tell the Japanese that the United States will give all the support they needed. But Steve told him that they needed a more effective approach because troops, aircraft and rockets were all used before and only ended up confusing and antagonizing Godzilla further. He told General Goodhue that Godzilla was looking for something and they needed to figure out what it was before it was too late. A helicopter then dropped off Goro on the rooftop of Professor Hayashida's office. He went inside to help them get the device for the frequency ready. He looked at the TV screen that showed live footage of Godzilla continuing through Tokyo. Godzilla was passing right above the bunker where Prime Minister Mitamura and other government officials were. They felt the entire bunker shake with each step Godzilla took near them. The military was getting ready to conduct the luring operation and sent 2 units out to get Godzilla's attention. Meanwhile, a bum was raiding the kitchen of a fancy restaurant and helping himself to a large dinner he could never afford. He then pretended to be a rich customer demanding a waiter to take his food away, but then Godzilla was watching him through the window. He tried to threaten Godzilla, but he ignored the bum and walked right past him. Professor Hayashida and the others were busy finishing up the last of the device and completed the test of Frequency 1, which brought Godzilla right in front of them. They switched to Frequency 2 and Godzilla slowly turned around. He walked over to them and the military shot lasers at him before he could get closer to the building. However, his tail knocked into the side of the building and caused Professor Hayashida's office to start collapsing. They hurried towards the roof, using the stairs, but the door to outside and the shutters on the window were locked. Goro then went downstairs to get something to help them while the military kept luring Godzilla away. Then the Super X fighter plane came. The military kept using lasers to lure Godzilla out of the city and Goro returned with a crowbar to get the shutters on the window open. The Super X fighter plane lined up in front of Godzilla and Godzilla blasted his atomic breath at them. But the plane was only singed. They launched a flare to get Godzilla's attention and fired missiles into his mouth. His mouth started foaming and they continued the same tactic repeatedly. He had swallowed some of the missiles and his heart started to beat slow and steady. Godzilla paused what he was doing as he felt his heart pounding in his chest. On the rooftop, Goro kept trying to get the shutters open and Professor Hayashida went to see what was going on with Godzilla. Godzilla was starting to lose consciousness and fell against a building where he remained unresponsive. Everyone thought that Godzilla was now dead, but Steve knew otherwise. Meanwhile, the Russian satellite was now taking its position above the Gulf of Mexico and launched the nuclear missile. The Pentagon got the alert and tried to find out who authorized the launch. The Russian envoy sent a message to the Japanese government about the accidental launch of the nuclear bomb that was set to explode over Tokyo in 30 minutes. The blast would be 50 times bigger than the one in Hiroshima. They found out that the missile control was concealed on board the Russian ship that was docked at Tokyo Bay. Prime Minister Mitamura told them to call the Americans so they could shoot the missile down before it was too late. Professor Hayashida and Naoko watched Godzilla's unconscious body and she wanted to know if he was dead. But Hayashida knew Godzilla could not die so easily. They then heard the alert for the nuclear missile that was going to hit in 25 minutes. The scientists showed that the missile was launched over the Gulf of Mexico and would enter the atmosphere somewhere over the Hawaiian Islands. The expected airburst over Tokyo was estimated to be in 24 minutes. General Goodhue told Foreign Minister Emery that the United States never sent an offensive missile to intercept an incoming missile, but they would give it their best to stop the nuclear bomb. He told Colonel Rashtian to contact their nuclear missile base. Steve told him that he hoped they will succeed, but he warned that Godzilla will live no matter what happened. The United States launched their nuclear missile and the Japanese tracked the positions of both missiles as one went to intercept the other. There were 6 minutes until stratospheric detonation. Meanwhile, Goro still tried to get the shutters open using a drill, but the drill snapped off its cap and punctured his arm. Naoko quickly wrapped the wound with a cloth she had and they heard the helicopter coming closer. They went to the open window and waved at the helicopter to get its attention. Hiroshi was in the helicopter and saw them. One of the soldiers shot a device at the glass and Hiroshi told them to get away from the window. The glass then shattered into pieces and Hiroshi got into a harness to get to them. Goro wanted to know if the missile was still coming and he told him that a counter-missile was sent by the Americans. Hiroshi placed the harness around Hayashida and sent him up to the helicopter, but he did not have the device with him. The turbulence was increasing and the helicopter could not stay in the same position for long. They sent the harness back down and Hiroshi took the device to the helicopter. The pilot told Goro and Naoko to make their way to the street while they sent another helicopter to pick them up. The helicopter then left. Meanwhile, the missile was still coming with 2 minutes to impact. The Americans had only seconds until their missile destroyed the Russian missile. The missiles collided and exploded in the stratosphere. The aftershocks of the stratospheric nuclear explosion tampered with the electronics, and Steve reminded the lieutenant that in 1962, for 40 whole minutes, a high atmospheric test shut down transmission over a 7,000-mile perimeter all the way from Australia to California, USA. Goro and Naoko watched how the sky turned red from the explosion. The Super X plane was suffering from propulsion and rotor failures due to the aftershocks of the stratospheric explosion. They landed on a highway and the sky returned to normal. Then an electrical storm of atomic energy came which struck around Godzilla. Godzilla absorbed the lightning and woke up. After the repairs to the Super X plane was finished, they left when they saw Godzilla was still alive. Godzilla started to follow them and blasted his atomic breath through a building to get to them. They fired more missiles and lasers at him. Goro and Naoko tried to leave the building they were in as quickly as they could. Godzilla blasted his atomic breath at the Super X plane, but it hit the building Goro and Naoko was in. Goro and Naoko continued going down the stairs but were met with a hole that blocked their path. Professor Hayashida and Hiroshi arrived on Mount Mihara to set up the equipment. Godzilla continued fighting with the Super X, which left more buildings destroyed in explosions that left fires everywhere. Goro and Naoko used a hose to lower themselves through the hole in the stairway and saw the bum wandering around below them. Goro told the bum to hold onto the hose and they went down. Godzilla blasted his atomic breath at the Super X plane, which caused internal damage, and they retreated. Godzilla followed them and left the building Goro and the others were in. The Super X landed and sparks were flying everywhere inside the cockpit of the plane. Godzilla shoved a building over them and there was no signs of the Super X surviving. Goro and the others reached outside and saw Godzilla looking at them. Goro took Naoko away while the bum ran in the opposite direction after picking up a briefcase he found abandoned. The bum fell over and Godzilla walked over to him. Professor Hayashida and Hiroshi were doing the final preparations for the frequency to lure Godzilla and sent the frequency through dishes towards where Godzilla was. Goro and Naoko tried to find shelter while Godzilla came closer towards them, but then Godzilla stopped in his tracks. He detected the frequency and turned around to follow it. Goro and Naoko watched Godzilla leave and they knew Professor Hayashida was at Mount Mihara. Goro knew he should be there and took Naoko with him. When the power came back on in the bunker, they saw that Godzilla was heading to Hashima Island. Godzilla walked onto the island, following the frequency that was emitting from a dish that was placed at the top of Mount Mihara, and he stood at the volcano's mouth. He looked down at the lava below and looked around. He saw the dish that was emitting the frequency and walked over to the rim of the volcano. He then fell inside when the ground below him caved in. He landed on a ledge that overlooked the lava and could not get out. Hiroshi then pressed the button to detonate all the bombs to drop Godzilla into the lava. Godzilla kept roaring as the Japanese government and the Pentagon looked on at the sight. Godzilla let out a painful screeching roar as he fell into the lava and the volcano erupted. Goro and Naoko arrived on a helicopter and looked down at the volcano. Nature had a way of reminding man of just how small he is. She occasionally throws up the terrible offsprings of our pride and carelessness to remind us of how puny we really are in the face of a tornado, an earthquake, or a Godzilla. The reckless ambitions of man are often dwarfed by their dangerous consequences. For now, Godzilla, that strangely innocent and tragic monster, has gone to Earth. Whether he returns or not, or was never again seen by human eyes, the things he has taught us were named. So a new era, a new Godzilla. This is where the franchise started to return to its darker tone that the original Gojira, 1954, had. The Heisei era is meant to be a direct continuation of the events of 1954 instead of it being just another Godzilla that appeared like Showa Godzilla was portrayed as. Now, to be honest, I can tell you everything that happened in the Heisei era because, 1, it was only 7 movies and not 14 like the Showa era was, and 2, each movie was just so heavy that you cannot forget what happened. But I'll leave my discussions on those for later on in the series. But the way this movie ended was sad, especially with Steve's last words where he said that Godzilla was a strangely innocent and tragic monster. And that is definitely true, as we'll see in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, 1991. But come on. Why did they have to put him in a volcano? I don't know if that's worse than being imprisoned in Antarctica for 20 years like Final War's Godzilla went through. I just felt his pain when he screamed like that at the end. If none of you know who Steve Martin is, he was the narrator and one of the main protagonists in the original film, Gojira, 1954. He was an American reporter who came to visit his friend, Ishiro Serizawa, who was the inventor of the oxygen destroyer. But when he heard of the mysterious disappearances of fishing boats, Steve got involved in the investigation and he witnessed and survived to tell about Godzilla's first rampage on Tokyo. The Return of Godzilla is about Godzilla's reappearance after 30 years of being thought dead and the humans' attempt to imprison him. This is a new timeline starting from Godzilla 1954. No body of the original Godzilla was ever found, so the 30 years that the Showa era filled is left blank in this alternate timeline. I think that Heisei Godzilla had it rough out of all the versions of Godzilla in the franchise. Shin Godzilla also had it rough, but you can't really blame him if he approached Japan looking all menacing like in his fourth form. That was more based on the impression that he was giving off to others. Heisei, on the other hand, was just a regular-looking Godzilla who still held a grudge against the humans for many things that we're going to see later on. But no. They had to lock him in a volcano after using the oxygen destroyer on him 30 years ago. That's not fair and was a bit harsh on the humans' part. And things are only going to get harder as the era goes on. This aspect of the story reintroduces us to Godzilla, but in a different timeline from the Showa era. In the next movie, we'll be introduced to Biollante, a plant hybrid monster, and the concept of G-cells. Be sure to like and subscribe for more. Until next time.